Hi, everyone. My name is Dominique Shelton Leipzig. I am a partner in Parkins Coie's Privacy and Data Security Group, and I am the global co-chair of the firm's Adtech Privacy and Data Management team. My predictions for 2020, COVID, privacy, and how those two things actually transform incident response. I think we're entering into a new era where privacy and data security are increasingly becoming intertwined. Laws like the CCPA are only going to supercharge that, and societal events like COVID-19 will force that to happen.
Well, that was a terrific keynote from Justin Herring, and I want to thank both Justin and Ken for putting that together for us. The next keynote is really an about-face from what we just heard. This one you get to hear from an FBI agent on the front lines, Supervisory Special Agent, SSA, Michael Sohn, who is currently leading a cyber squad at the FBI Los Angeles Field Division. He literally just went over there, I think in the last day or so, being one of 6 passengers on a plane from DC to LA. He really represents the newer generation of FBI agents who are very specialized technologists. He actually worked for Jason Smolenoff at one time, who you saw in session 2 when Jason was at the FBI. He has a computer science degree from the U.S. Military Academy and a Master of Computer Information Systems as well. His background is just fascinating and includes time as a cyber counterintelligence officer for the Army and a counterterrorism officer for the Defense Intelligence Agency. I think we really wanted to bring in SSA Sohn for a keynote because his credentials are just so terrific. We wanted to get some full time with him. And SSA Sohn, you could obviously work anywhere you wanted on the planet. So we just want to thank you for opting instead to keep us all safe and welcome you to the forum. I hope all is okay for you in LA and the trip was safe. So welcome to the IR forum.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
Excellent. And Dominique Shelton Leipzig from Parkins Coie will be the one interviewing SSA Sohn. We needed somebody, obviously, from LA to interview someone from LA. And as chair of the privacy and data security team at Parkins Coie, Dominique Leipzig is really the perfect choice. What sets her apart is her wide skill set. We wanted someone who not only has led a broad range of IR, but who also truly understood national and international privacy ecosystems, cyber preparedness, and compliance. This follows the theme in Dominique's One Big Thing, which you all just watched. She's really built her career around the juxtaposition and balance of data privacy and data security. They're going to have a little bit of a PowerPoint, which is obviously in contradiction to our rules. But, when an FBI agent tells you he wants to do something, you do it. So I hope no one minds. I think it'll be worth it. Thanks for being here, Dominique. Hope all is okay with you in LA and that you're safe and healthy. I'm going to leave now and we'll prepare for the next panel.
Thank you so much, John. Well, and I just want to thank everyone for being here, and we're going to dive right into the program. And so first, we had John's great introduction of you, Mike, already, but would you mind just sharing with the audience a little bit about your background, and then we're going to jump into how people can work with the FBI. But let's start with your background.
Sure. So good afternoon or good morning or wherever you are on the coast. Again, my name is Mike Sohn. I'm one of the cyber supervisors on the Los Angeles field office. So just real quick about me. I've been in the FBI since 2007. As John said, my background is in technology since college. But I was a former Army officer. I worked at a consulting firm in Booz Allen Hamilton in Washington, D.C. I was a DIA officer and a U.S. counterintelligence officer. So, but more from the incident response side. So my experience in the FBI, fortunately, has always been in cyber ever since I joined since 2007. So some of the cases I worked on, the national security stuff, some of the nation state APTs, the Russia, the DPRK cases, the PRC cases, and then also from the cyber criminal intrusion cases, ranging from fraud to complex cyber intrusions. But I think working on those two experiences from an incident response, I really got to see the tools that are the blended tools and how they've matured since 2007, because all the way from the indictments that the FBI does and the impact of that, how the bad guys conduct their operation, it changes from a defensive side from an incident response as well. So So just want to kind of share some experience. Again, thank you for having me come up to.
Very excited to hear. And of course, with your deep experience, you can really help us understand, especially right now where phishing incidents are up 600%, scams are sort of abundant. How can companies interact with the FBI on incident response? And if you could just walk us through that process a little.
Sure. So, a lot of people think incident response is a much complex scenario where we talk to everyone, but there's really three things from the FBI when we look at the incident response. Is the network defense, where the companies, the victim companies, are conducting their network defense, and the incident response. Sometimes, depending on the size of the company, they do their own incident response in-house, or sometimes they bring in the outside capabilities in. And then the law enforcement side. And how does that work all together? It's always been really tough. We work a lot with the energy sector, and they are really focused on when do we bring in law enforcement and what does that mean? So I really want to kind of talk about hey, here's what we can do, here's what we can't do. Because a lot of people think, hey, if we broke in, hey, FBI, can you come in and fix our computers or bring our network back up? Or can you talk to our insurance companies? And that's not where we are. But I really want to dispel some of the myths, but also help out hey, this is how you could work with the FBI, right? But also, this is the standard that for all of you in the audience, this is old school. Everyone knows about this. Here's where the incident response phases are. But I'd really like to say from the FBI perspective, because we are out there working with the private sector, the FBI Cyber has really pushed forward as sharing intel with private sector. Is we're kind of in all of these aspects now. It used to be just call us when there was intrusion in your company and what do we do? But we're finding out the most effective way is getting us involved earlier. So if you have, during your preparation, during your tabletop, ask us, right? So if you don't have a relationship with your law enforcement counterparts, it doesn't have to be the FBI, right? I'm in the FBI, but HSI, Secret Service, any of those components that are conducting cyber intrusions, investigations, they are good help. They are good resources for the companies to kind of say, hey, I have this tabletop, or during detection, hey, I have this malware. I don't know what this is. My incident response team really can't do anything. Do you know anything about it? Depending on the relationship you have, this is where the preparation is so important, because if the one time you call is after everything has been exfilled or everything's been wiped, it's really not much we can do, right? What we want to do is help prevent the cyber attack, where you could ask this question. There's a lot of private companies in LA who actually have my cell phone number. They call me when they have issues, and we could help answer them. Sometimes we can't share all the information, but we could give them good guidelines. And this is why I go out to a lot of private sector. We kind of talk to them. When we say we're doing cyber to an outreach, we're not just saying, hey, we're out here. We really want to work with you to prevent a cyber attack, because once a cyber attack occurs, our phase of operation is slightly different than other types of investigations. And I think Dominique, this is where we met a long time ago, because we were doing a lot of outreach with the law firms and a lot of companies out in LA.
Exactly. And, this is a good opportunity to talk a little bit about how businesses engage with you and, what information they should share. And so maybe you can bring some of the examples that we discussed in prep, and then we can go over the B2B situation.
Sure. So I want to bring this up. I think this was brought up in the earlier National Security Cyber from the agenda earlier today about the CISA Act. So this is hopefully where our lawyer partners could really be more make sure I don't go out of line here. But this act was to help allow companies and victim companies to share cyber threat information with U.S. law enforcement, U.S. government, right? We're not talking PII. We're not talking company proprietary information. But how do this gives the capability for companies to share information legally without any retribution. Now, there's a lot of things on here why this is so important, because if you're a victim company, we've had situation a while back where we say we don't want to share information with law enforcement, even though they're the victims. Can you get a subpoena, or can you get a search warrant? And for those who are former attorneys, who are former federal prosecutors or any prosecutors, getting a warrant on a victim is much harder. It's very time consuming. So typically we always ask that the companies provide us consent. This is where the preparation phase is so important, because we do want to get with your in-house counsel and say, hey, when a cyber attack occurs, these are things we're going to want from you, right? And we always want that clear, because if you kind of work through that once the breach occurs, the timeline lagging is for those who've done incident response. They move fast, right? They're moving in hours. We can't have warrants that take days or weeks to complete and get it to the victim companies as well. So,
one question just came in from the audience that I wanted to run by you. So, what about there's some have raised the question a couple different ways that they feel like the communication with the FBI might be seen as one way. Where do you feel like the FBI is able to share certain information with a victim, a business victim?
Right. So within the last several years, FBI Cyber Division made a big push to kind of share out our indicators of compromise to the victim companies through pins and flashes. This is where the liaison, again, kind of is super important. Preparation is, we have, at least in the LA field office, we have a team of folks that are dedicated to working with private sector, sending them information, sending them anything that can help prevent it versus, hey, this has already happened. This is ever since any of the major cyber threat that's occurring, you'll see a lot of information that's being pushed out to the ISACs. So if you're part of the ISACs, we push them to the ISACs as fast as we can. So the intels that may or may not be available on your on the vendor capabilities, but we're pushing that to them as well, right? So this is a whole of society approach versus whole of government. And again, every field office is slightly different, but this is where you have to build that relationship, and this is where the preparation phase is so important. So it's not a black hole of information going in, but it's a two-way street.
Right, and that early relationship and the preparedness that you talked about, it seems to be key to that. What about B2B incidents?
So one of the things, let me kind of talk about. Just real quick, Dominique, on some of the cyber sharing that's occurred with businesses. This is Sony attack. I was one of the SSAs with one of our whole team. Our whole office was involved just from a national type effort from cyber threat sharing. So this is the Sony timeline, obviously. When Sony attack occurred, this kind of goes back to the whole incident response phases. FBI was not the incident response team. Right. Obviously, Sony hired FireEye's Mandiant to do the incident response, but we work with both Sony and Mandiant to share that cyber threat intel, pull evidence, and kind of go with mitigating the situation. Now, the difference between the companies on our side is completely different. Right? So, from Sony's perspective, working in Mandiant, we're trying to get the network back up, make sure that company comes back online. But our point, this was last year where we indicted one of the cyber actors, North Korea. So we're taking that information and we're doing an investigation into who the bad guys are, and make sure that they don't do this again. Right. So again, just from a law enforcement perspective, where we sit, our goal, obviously we want to make sure the business is coming back online, make sure they're good, but that's not really our responsibility. If you're critical infrastructure, there's other resources available. But the FBI, for the most part, we're going after the criminals with providing some intel so we could keep the business afloat. Right?
So helpful, because there are so many criminals out there, and it's only increasing right now in the current vulnerable times that society, really we're in. One question that comes up when it's one thing when there's a victim business and consumers or individuals involved, but what about B2B where you've got that situation?
So this is very interesting timeline right now, because I think what we're seeing is a lot of larger companies have that cyber security in place. What the criminals have realized is, okay, that's much harder. Let's go after the third party, right? So your vendors or third parties, and we're seeing that from business email compromise. That's going to be talked about. I think it's going to be talked about. They're going after your smaller vendor, or how do I share threat information with our business to business, right? How does that work? So this is a perfect example. This is all in open source. So I'll kind of talk about it, but this is a very interesting situation because this occurred right in our backyard in LA. So the dark overlord was a hacker, was hacking multiple military contractors, health departments, patient records, and then pretty much extorting them, right? So he's not a nation state actor, but his skill sets was very sophisticated, and he was able to go and penetrate a bunch of people, steal stuff, and then extort them. So this is where the business to business, it gets very interesting, and why this is so important for the larger companies to have a relationship with third-party vendors, make sure that their security is also is up to par. Right. So what happened was, I'll go back to in April 2017, this hacker, the dark overlord TDO, started extorting Netflix and multiple other companies for things they stole. Right. So this is a tweet that came out. He's extorting Netflix. So if you imagine, and not just Netflix, a bunch of other companies, so other studios. So what happens when this occurs, if you're not sharing within your own peer companies, is had they done this, Netflix, the way this played out was, had Netflix did not share with their counterparts, with their peers, even though they're competitors, they would have thought their network was breached. We got a call from Netflix, said, hey, we think we were breached. They said they stole all of our Orange is the New Black series, right? So that's the first instance that you have, not knowing that, hey, there might have been a breach somewhere else. So fast forward to June. So this is, again, if you Google this, is a very interesting article where the third party Larson Studio was a company that was breached. They're a third party post-production company that was breached. And what they did was, because they were taking from a lot of other studios, they're taking Orange is New Black, and multiple videos, and only when they started all the studios started working together, it's like, oh wait, it's not our network, it's this one studio. So Larson came out after almost hiding for a while. They came out and kind of told their story on why it was so important to, one, share cyber threat information with our vendors, and also working with law enforcement as well. So just kind of just real quick in the background, around Christmas time, they got extorted for $50,000. If you read the article, one of my agents that was on my squad, I sent them out there. We did tell them to not pay the extortion, but they did it anyways. So that's kind of out of our control. So they did that, and they thought they were fine, right? So this is back in February. Well, March comes along, and that's when that tweet comes out, March and April. So after all this, studios started cutting all their contracts, and this is what one of the owners said, right? So again, they try to hide it. They didn't want to tell their vendors, but now because of the situation, this is what they said. They said we would love to get the, make different decisions. Had I known this is what the extortion is going to do, right? Because you're trusting the criminals to not come back. What the criminals did was, once they took a bunch of files, they didn't realize what they had. Then they went back, took all the data, and started extorting the third party or the major vendors, right? Versus the third party. They thought they were on the clear. This really cost them, obviously their reputation. But they did come out in June, July with a report to kind of say, hey, this is what's really happened. Learn from us, right? So I thought this was a very good article for them and for a lot of lessons learned for a lot of companies that are doing incident response.
Thank you, Michael. That's so helpful. And I thought it'd be helpful now to just sort of, I think we've got about 5 minutes or so left to run through who you work with on the governmental side, what other agencies, and then also any tips that you have for how the FBI can be helpful with the, sort of spate and of COVID scams that are going on. So sure. I'll ask the questions in the interest of time.
Sure. So I'll kind of just skip to one of the more interesting part when this occurred in 2015 when Black Energy hit the Ukraine cyber attack. When we work with critical infrastructure or major cyber attack, we do work with all the partners. This was actually one of the FBI and DHS and DOE, I believe, flew out to Ukraine to kind of look at some of this. We will share that cyber threat information to make sure that our energy sector is not also impacted as well. So these are the kind of sharing that we do. One of the things that was brought up before, and for a lot of attorneys, is, if you share with the FBI, who else do we share it with? Do I have to notify? We had a situation where they said, are you going to notify the breach, or are you going to enforce the breach notification rules? And the FBI, if you're a breach, we treat you as a victim. We do not go out of our way to make sure that, that's on between, I'm not saying you shouldn't do that, but I'm just saying, like, we treat you as a victim. That information does not go outside of our agency unless it's to do cyber protection or something and we will mask typically that victim information. Right? Just real quick on how do we do this. You're gonna get some of this, the BEC, COVID, business email compromise. The FBI in 2017, I believe, created what we call the Recovery Asset Team, the RAT. They could have come up with a better name, but they didn't. The BEC is still the problem. This was last year. What we're doing is recovering funds. So back in 2015, we realized we didn't have a way to recover funds. So in fact, our team flew a lot of the bank investigators from all over the United States and said, hey, this is a big problem. How do we stop fraud? How do we stop this kind of email spear phishing, spoofing, and vendor impersonation? And because of that, this team was created, and I'm very proud of this, but our team alone, our squad in LA recovered over $100 million in 1 year for victims that went right back to the victims themselves, right? But BEC is a big problem. It accounts for almost 82% of all cybercrime that's reported to the FBI. BEC actors, they do BEC, confidence romance, investment, non-payment, and the top 5 out there is all the same actors doing the same type of activity to get to that money. So almost 82% of all crimes reported to the FBI are BEC related. So I think that one of the sessions you're going to attend is very important. But one of the things that we have is this. That website is super important. If you do have money transferred via BEC, we need this information. Since we set the team up, once they get this is the fastest way. This constitutes a report to the FBI or law enforcement, and our team that's looking at it, if they're able to recover, they will contact the banks and they will recover the funds back to the victims. But just for those incident response folks and all the attorneys on there, all of that information has to be there, because that's how, especially if the money goes overseas, that's how they track it. And you might say, I don't want the victim, I don't want my own information to the FBI. It's like, well, sometimes we may need that, especially if it goes overseas, right? Because that's how the tracking system works. So this is the form. Please fill that out as much as you can. Check BEC so that our team could act on it. Again, it's been very effective based on the timeline that we have. So I think that's it from my side.
Thank you so much, Mike. This is so helpful. And my takeaways are: begin a relationship with the FBI if you don't have that already in your cyber preparedness planning, and definitely use the tools that the FBI has already put forward. So with that, I just want to thank you so much, Mike. I think this is really informative. And I'll turn it back over to Bruce.
Thank you so much, Dominique. Fantastic job. Great presentation. So our next panel will be on responding to ransomware attacks. That's going to start at 1:40 p.m. We'll see you back here in a few minutes. Thank you all.